Nice.
Hey everybody, welcome to our live Farmers Q&A. Here with KGD Trade Farmers, and here to answer questions that you may have. I see folks rolling in, so we'll give people a couple minutes to roll in. And while you're doing that, while you guys are rolling in, I told you last time I'm gonna try to go live on Facebook. I'm slightly nervous. So let's do it. So while you guys are rolling in, I'll connect us on Facebook as well, and folks on Facebook will be able to listen in as well. So give us a second to get all of that started. Yep, so hope everybody is doing well today. It's nice and sunny. I'm sure after this webinar, we'll be all out in our gardens.
Yep.
Can anybody else hear the sirens going off?
Yes.
Yep.
I'm so glad I'm not at the farm.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's so loud at the farm.
First Saturday of the month.
It's always fun when we like have volunteers at the farm when
And they're like,
yeah.
and we're like, thanks so much for coming out. And they're like, we're deaf.
Yeah.
All right, almost done with the I have to like name it and everything. So all right, so how's everybody doing today? If you can, while I'm figuring out the live piece, if you can find the chat box, we're gonna communicate via chat, your questions and things like that. Find the chat box and just drop me a line and let me know how you're doing today. How's things going? There's a lot of heaviness in the world, and how are you doing? You can just drop me a chat and tell me how you're doing. Okay, I think we're going live on Facebook, y'all. I'm doing both things. I think it's happening. Hey, Catherine, hopeful, yes. All right. So let's, I guess we can go ahead and kick it off. We are preparing our live. It is almost going live. And so, hey, Tish, how are you? Yeah, got to get in that garden, huh? Okay, so we have our farmers here today. Take a couple seconds to introduce folks on the line. My name is T. I work over at Keep Growing Detroit with these lovely people on the screen. One thing, if you're new to Zoom, feel free to adjust your view. You have a couple options. You can follow the speaker, or you can make your view a gallery view where you can see everybody at the same time. So feel free to adjust that. Want to go ahead and introduce folks. Can I start with you, Molly? Who are you?
Hey guys, I'm Molly. I'm one of the farmers at KGD Farm, also an educator.
Awesome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on? I will share host so you can screen share maybe some of the pictures of things you're working on right now.
Yeah, sure.
All right. All right.
Let
You
me
should be able to.
share screen. Nice. Let's see that. Okay, can you guys see the screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome, cool. So over at KGD Farm, we've got a lot going on. So right now you guys can probably see radishes. Good reminder that we are harvesting cold season crops and things that we planted back in April, radishes being one of them. We are also starting to have our first pest issues and pest and disease challenges because of the heat and the weather. This is a photo actually of a beneficial insect. It's hard to tell the scale, but that is a like very, very, very new, very tiny praying mantis. First instar, these guys are starting to come out and they're about the size of your pinky nail. These guys love to eat all the bad bugs in your garden, so watch out for them. I just found this one in the backyard yesterday. We're also concerned with weed management. This spring we used black plastic mulch with holes burned in it to try and give us a little bit of control over some weeds and high value crops like strawberries. So this is an image of our template and burner for using black plastic or woven landscaping fabric. And that's what it looks like when it's out in the field. Those are strawberry plants, bare root strawberry plants that we put in. And I don't actually have, this is an old photo. They're probably 6 or 8 inches tall now and they have fruit on them, but this gives you an idea of what it looks like. Overhead view of the spacing. This is our rig for pest control in Brother, our greenhouse at KGD Farm. We had an aphid issue and we solved it or managed it by using safer insect soap. So this is our insect soap sprayer and some peppers for the garden resource program. And this is in our other, our high tunnel at KGD Farm. This is sister high tunnel. And this gives you actually an idea of a couple things that we're working on. This is one of our beds and there are tomatoes and radishes, or were tomatoes and radishes in it. This is some of like our intercropping that we do to maximize space in the high tunnel. And you can also see the trellising, the little, if you look really closely, you can see the tomato clips that we're using to string those guys up, and the radishes, and drip line, which is what we use to irrigate. Some of our native plants out in our perennial area, these are things we grow at KGD Farm. Michaela can talk about that, but some of these, this is columbine, are starting to flower and attract pollinators. This is another picture of intercropping. We use white clover in the pathways to pull in pollinators into the high tunnel and also to act as kind of a living mulch in our pathways. Put a lot of photos of that on here. This isn't my photo, this is coming in from a GRP gardener, but this is another reminder that with the heat and our plants starting to come on, we should be mindful of, you know, doing weekly scoutings for pests and diseases. So this is some insect damage on squash. And this is not a great photo now that I see it really big, but if you guys planted garlic from us last fall, this is the time where you should be out there looking for the scape, the fruiting part of the flowering part of the hardneck variety that we gave you. They should be just starting to come up from the top. They may look like this, kind of in the center of the picture. Once that forms kind of a curl, then they're really good to harvest and eat. That's my cat. So this is my backyard. It's another example of use of landscaping fabric. I'm gonna do that. Use of landscaping fabric and trellising in a high tunnel. This is an old photo. They're a lot bigger now.
Yeah. So you went right through your paths on that one.
What's that?
You went right over your paths with that too.
Oh yeah, the entire house is covered. And I have irrigation lines, drip line underneath it. I'm very busy, so that helps me stay on top of everything.
Nice.
Solarizing. This is what we did for some of our fallow fields in the spring. We used black plastic to suppress the weeds before we tilled. This is what it looked like. I wish I had an after photo. And we're back to harvesting. We have a million other things going on, of course, but those are some highlights.
Nice. Okie dokie. So that's Molly. And so this is the Farmers Q&A. I see more people rolling in. Thanks for joining us. Molly Keem says, where did you get the black plastic like that?
Oh yeah, the black plastic sheeting for solarizing was actually it was bought at Home Depot. They sell rolls in many sizes, but those are 20 feet by 100 feet. I think they're $80 a roll. You'll have them for a couple seasons if you treat them well. And the landscaping fabric you can get a couple places. Amazon sells it. And if you're not an Amazon person, Greenhouse Megastore online sells it too. And the specific brand is DeWitt Sunbelt. It's I think it's either the 10 or 20-year woven landscaping fabric. And it's expensive, but it lasts a good 5-10 years in regular use. My sheets that I use at home are 6 years old and they're showing no sign of wear. So
wow,
yeah, it's a good investment for me anyways, for management.
Nice. Okay, so we are going to allow folks to ask questions here and there, but I just wanted to kind of start off by introducing our panel. And it looks like we got kicked off Facebook, but I will try to get that going again. But I'm sorry. So then, so Molly is one of two farmers at the KGD farm. The second one here is a Kello. Hello. Can you introduce yourself and what you do at the farm?
Yeah. Let me go to the screen. Yes, hello everybody. My name is Kevin Permoco, one of the other farmers, but I should say one of the many farmers at KGD now. But what I've particularly focused on is the transplant production for the Garden Research Program, native plant production, and youth farm education, and a couple of other classes throughout the year. And let me know if I'm not speaking loud enough. But let me go through some pictures of what I'm focusing on now. So let's see if that's working. So right now we're really into our native plant production. So plants like black-eyed Susans, purple prairie clover, purple lovegrass, all these things that are native plants we're starting to pot up now. Typically our quote unquote season for those, I begin a cold stratification, and that's you mixing the seed with water and some other type of media and then putting inside the refrigerator for 60 to 30 days. And it depends on what are the instructions for the plants. And then once those 30 days are finished, I seed them into these 228 trays here, and we get those from BFG Supply. And then after about a month, they look like so. And then we brought them up to the 38 trays in the back over here. And let me see if I can, yep, there we go. So these are the 38 plug trays. Some of them I have one plant in there. Some of the trays have multiple plants seeded in there that will thin later. And recently we just finished our hot crop distribution. So I guess a little behind the scenes. So hot crop planting gets done around, and the seed order gets done for that in January, but our fall crop order, that's finished currently. So we are able to recalibrate for the kind of new memberships that we've gotten this past year. So hopefully you all will enjoy that change that we've been able to make. And one other thing that's on my plate that's coming up is youth lessons. See, I believe we have around 20 youth, or more than that, 20 youth that will be doing Zoom classes like this throughout the year and help them out with their garden and having them with us while we're in the garden online. But besides that, that is pretty much it for me. Well, I got one more thing that's happening inside the greenhouse. If I can find it. Four more. Yeah. Just outfitting the greenhouse with shade cloth. So this is I believe a 30 by 50 foot piece of shade cloth that I'm gonna hang inside the greenhouse. June and July is pretty high. It's pretty hot inside the greenhouse, so to help those plants grow a little bit more, I guess, controlled and not too stressed out by the heat, will definitely help out our transplants for fall crop production and native plants. For those that missed the native plant sale that we did the past couple of weeks, our next one will be in late August, but we might do a third round or second round sometime in between. You'll have to keep a lookout on the newsletter for that information. Finito.
Nice. Thank you, Akello. All right, so folks just joining us, feel free to jump in the chat box while you guys are throwing questions in there. I'm just introducing the panel so you know what people work on at KGD. I'm T. I'm going to be, kind of moderating the chat box here. Lola up in the corner is going to be supporting with the Facebook Live if we can get it going. And so we introduced Molly, we introduced Akello. Go ahead and start throwing your questions in the chat box. And then we got one more panelist, which is Keto. You want to introduce yourself and tell us what you do at KGD?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So under normal circumstances, I spend most of my time working on coordinating and teaching classes for our education series. But under the circumstances with COVID, we've reorganized all of our staff to spend a lot of time at the farm to help Akello and get GRP transplants online, and then also to get farm work done. So typically, under normal circumstances, we have a lot of support from volunteers with getting all of the things that happen on the farm taken care of, and that's not an option right now. So I've been helping a lot with the farm field work. We kind of have this whole setup with our staff, half of which are working with Akello and greenhouse stuff related to transplants and native plants, and then the other half of the staff working on field work in our in-ground sister, which we lovingly call sister. And then we and doing field work, getting all these plants in the ground. So I have a lot of experience with farming. I did the organic farming program at MSU and been kind of doing a lot to learn about it over the years. In the 10+ years I've been working in this field. But we've been focusing a lot lately. The the topic is ongoing is just keeping weeds in check has been a huge thing at this point in the season. Some weeds are a little bit easier to get. Some of them, we're trying to get them as young and as small as possible, but some weeds are just really a bear. We have lots of nutsedge in the garden right now, and quackgrass is a huge problem in some of the fields. So it's just rotating from we have 7 fields that we're working outside, and then roughly 20 or 30 in the greenhouse. So we're just constantly rotating from field to field, trying to keep those weeds in check. And then the other thing that we're kind of managing is, and we will be managing more and more, is watering and making sure that the fields have enough water but not too much, which is a huge thing at the farm because of the nature of the site that we're working on. Unfortunately, is especially on the street side, there's a lot of standing water, or the water table is high. So when we get big rain events, too much water is a concern. There are a few fields that we are constantly having to mitigate, and we're trying different strategies on being able to let these plants grow without them being flooded out or the roots rotting out. So yeah, that's a start. Hi guys.
Thank you, Keto. Okay, so it looks like we're back on live. So we'll be trying to field questions from live and from the Zoom. So welcome if you're just joining us. This is the open space to just get through some of your gardening questions. We know that many people are new to the program. As Akello mentioned, last year we ended the program with 1,600 gardens. This year, we're at June and we're at 1,800. So we've seen a huge increase in the number of GRP applications. So let's get going to some of these questions. This may be a time of the year where you've got things planted and you're starting to get things popping up, pest issues, watering issues. Let's get through some of these questions. So first question we have here is from Justin. He says, I'm a GRP member. I haven't been able to receive any resources this year. Justin, sorry, we got to figure that out. If you signed up for a family garden or community garden with the Garden Resource Program, you should have gotten a link to pick up either cold or hot crops. There are still hot crops available at the farm. And so let's make sure we get you that link. Justin, if you can send me an email, tee@keepgrowingdetroit.org, I'll make sure you get to the right person and make sure you get that link, okay? Sorry about that. This has been a little bit of a harder year for the Garden Resource Program. We've tried to get to as many people as possible. So sorry about that. And this is your first year, but typically you'd be coming to the farm, picking out your own plants, joining us for education classes in person and meeting our staff and other gardeners across the city. So this is a pretty unusual year. So stick with us. Next question is from Catherine. This is for Akello. How are your grains doing? Are you putting in rice again? Have you done that already? What's your plans with that?
So I have not been able to do any grain production this year. GRP transplants have taken up pretty much most of the time, and when it had an opportunity to plant, the seeding window has already passed.
Oh,
yeah.
Wah, wah, wah.
But we got our plans. Yeah.
Catherine, I wonder if you tried some grains, or if there's anybody on the line who tried their rice this year. Let us know. We do have a class coming up. Is that next week, Keto? Grains?
Yep. Yeah.
That'll be Keto and John, right?
Yep.
Talking about growing rice. And so, great. So keep the questions coming. I'll just get to them. So Tish has a question about drip watering. I have a lot of containers, and I would like to know how to use drip lines in my containers. I'm gonna give that one to Keto. Can you help her with that?
Yeah, so you can definitely set up drip irrigation for containers. The only caveat I would say is that it's going to ultimately, when you're dealing with lots of containers, you're going to have a spaghetti of hoses going from one, like basically how drip would work for something like containers is you would have a main solid line going through, and you have your containers all over, and the solid line is, going close to where all your containers are or behind them or whatever, based on how they're set up. And then you would get, there's different systems to do this, and maybe we could write some things in the notes, or when I'm not speaking next, I can write some things in the notes. But essentially you're poking it's a specific, for drip irrigation line, you poke a hole in it that's got a leader tube that would go into what's called an emitter that would go into each individual pot. People use it for landscaping. I think that you could probably get most of those kinds of fittings these days at some of the big box stores like Home Depot. You just got to be up for like having it be lots of little hoses, coming out with it. It is a possibility. That said, it would need to be a setup where you have access to pressurized water or city water. Doing that from a rain barrel or a tank is kind of a different animal. There are what are called low flow irrigation systems that are specifically made for tapping into rain barrels or rain tanks. But for individual containers, it's not really a good fit. How that's usually set up is it's done with drip tape, so a line that is kind of intended to go along a bed or on a big flat surface to go to individual tanks, which would mean that the water would go down to the ground to that header line or that solid line, and then have to go up again into the pot would probably be a challenge. So I would say under those circumstances that wouldn't be a good match.
Okay.
We'll start. I'll leave it there, and I guess open it up if there's any more specific questions.
Yeah. Well, Tish, I hope that answered your question. If you have more questions about that, drop something in the line, or maybe you and Keto can sidebar about your particular issue. All right, Zora said, when you're using potting and topsoil, do you get a lot of weeds? I'll give that one to Molly. Thoughts on weeds, since you were talking about weed prevention earlier.
And the question is potting, like bagged potting soil versus topsoil?
Yeah, I'm thinking she's saying probably using containers. I know I did a lot of containers, and I put a lot of straw in mine to cut down the weeds.
Gotcha. Yeah. If you're building up new container gardens, so potting soil or potting media is effectively supposed to be sterile. So no seeds, no living in it. But if you're adding anything that is living or coming from a more natural environment, like bagged topsoil or bagged compost, or like T uses straw or hay or leaves from your backyard, whatever, you are adding whatever was in that topsoil. So you can get surprise weeds. And even then, like sometimes if you're buying from like one of the big box stores, the longer those bags sit in the yard, sometimes they like rip open and they tend to, like something gets blown through the wind and you're going to get like random dandelions too. So yeah, if you're adding something to your potting mix, like we encourage you to do to boost fertility and give your plants the best possible start, chances are you are bringing some sort of seeds or something in with it. And especially if you're the kind of folks like me who tend to reuse that soil year after year and maybe just add more compost to it, whatever fell into it or was added into it last season is going to come up again this season. So, yep.
Nice. Okay, Tish is asking, when is the Eastern Market Keep Growing Detroit table open and selling? I'm going to sidebar with that with you, Tish, because I think we're going online. Molly, do you have I know you were working on the online platform. Is that going to be for GID as well, or do you know about that?
To be determined. I think it's too early for us to do like the formal post, but we are working on that because of the COVID environment these days. So stay tuned. We'll have more details for folks shortly.
Okay, so if folks are new to Keep Growing Detroit, I just want to backtrack and tell you what Grown in Detroit table is, and what Tish is talking about is there are a number of people who sign up with the Garden Resource Program, and they sign up as a market garden specifically, and they are invited to join our cooperative, which is called the Grown in Detroit Cooperative, for folks who are looking to make a little money off of their garden. They come together, they set prices together, and they sell at Eastern Market together. So Tish was wondering, when are we starting that up based on COVID? We're a little bit behind, and it looks like we're going to try to move to an online platform. So that's to be determined still. Sorry about that. So Catherine said, yeah, Akela, she did buy some rice seeds, but she didn't have enough space to plant it. So wow. All right, so this is from Sarah. She says, I planted asparagus a little late this year because it was too cold, late April, early May. She dug a 12-inch wide, 12-inch deep trenches and put in about 25 asparagus crowns about 3 weeks ago. My question has to do with the immediate growth I'm seeing. As the spears sprout out, I continue to cover them with topsoil, but all the spears appear very thin and weak. So this is the first year asparagus growth. I know to leave the fruit this year and cut back in the fall, harvesting in the third year. Should I be worried about the strength and appearance of the spears at this point? So thin spears, first time. Let me ask Keto about that. I saw Molly shaking your head too. So Keto or Molly, do you want to chime in on that one?
Keto, go for it.
I would say that sounds about right. As long as they don't look yellowed at all, you want to see green growth. Yellowing would be a sign of, like nutrient deficiency or lack of light. But that's pretty common that they look kind of thin and tiny the first year, and they're just sending up as what they can with the energy they have from the roots that they're starting with, and they'll kind of build up, bigger brothers and sisters as they kind of get more established. I would say sounds like you're doing just fine.
Let's backtrack a little bit, and just for folks who may be new to growing, asparagus is a perennial vegetable in your garden, so it's coming back every year. Molly, you were smiling at the question. Did you have some thoughts about it too?
That's what mine look like this year. I just put in some, so they look pretty spindly. You do want to watch for little bugs, so protect them in their first year. So watch out for their like little black worms. I forget, they're like little caterpillars that can get rid of the foliage really, really quickly. And when they're that young, you want to watch out for them and just protect them, because yeah, if it only has the energy to send up 2 or 3 very, very thin shoots, if it loses any of those to pests this year, it'll knock it back for next year. So take good care and be watchful.
Is that asparagus beetle you're referring to?
Yeah, it's the little black, and they kind of swarm all over it, and they just eat the leaves completely. Could also, yeah, yep.
So I'm going to pause really quickly and just say, if you're calling in, you do have the ability to raise your hand. You can raise your hand and I can let you talk openly. Also, if you have a picture or something like that you want to send, throw that you have a picture in the chat box, and I'm going to try to figure that out too. If you have a picture of your garden that you want to show us and you have a question about. And Lola, before we go further with the questions here on Zoom, did you have anything from Facebook, or are we good to go?
Good to go.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's keep going with some of these questions. Keto, I think this is yours about soaker hoses. From Catherine, you see that in the chat. I bought some of these soaker hoses that aren't true drip irrigation. How should I modify my watering strategy for those type of hoses? Do you know what she's talking about, or do you need to talk to her a little bit about that question?
Hold on. Sorry.
If you
Can you
just
read?
post
I
it.
was there and then okay. I bought some of the soaker hoses that aren't true drip irrigation. Yes. So the difference between those is basically they're just hoses with holes in them, whereas drip tape is specifically engineered that the same amount of water comes out of all of the holes, which is really helpful when you have any variance in the topography of the garden, or like if it goes up and down and has any humps to it, the drip tape always consistently does water wherever it's laying. Whereas the soaker hose, because it doesn't have that specific engineering, it's just kind of like a bunch of holes in recycled tire, tube, that low spots tend to get more water. But aside from that, I think it's for the home gardener, I think it's a really great, locally available, easy to use tool. So it's just a matter of, just keep having an eye on. And the other thing that it seems to happen is that more water seems to come out towards the end of the line. So it's just a strategy. You just have to kind of play with it to, I guess, pay attention to where the water is actually going.
Yeah. Did you throw something in the chat, link to those soaker hoses?
Yeah, I was testing out, trying to show images of the asparagus beetle, but the link is kind of intense. So sorry about that. I was hoping that I could actually share the picture.
You can screen share if you want to. How about we go to the next question while we figure that out, Keto, if you'd like to show that. But I'll go to Keem's question. Keem says, let me give this one to Akello. Is it too late to plant potatoes in containers? If not, what kind of soil mix versus container size would you recommend?
Mm-hmm. So for potatoes, what you're typically looking at is around 80 to 130 days for time for days that they need for them to get to that harvest point. And I would say, and your planting date ideally is 4 to 6 weeks before the last frost. So I would still say just go for it if you want to get that experience with planting potatoes. And if you are going to plant them in pots, just make sure that your soil is light and not too heavy, because potatoes can experience kind of root rot if it's too moist. And so just making sure that your soil is fluffy, and if you mix in a little bit of compost to help those go through, and just making sure that you have the right depth of container. So something that's really long that will allow the roots of the potato to really go down. Or if you want to kind of simulate healing, you can just start your potato with just a little bit of soil within a container, and then just add it as your potato plant grows.
Mm-hmm.
But I say, it's the timing is very relevant, and and the season's changing and the climate's changing all the time. I say go for it. Go for planting your potato plants.
Mm-hmm.
And I do recommend that you just start from the bottom with just a little bit of soil, and then simulate your healing by just adding your plants every 4 to 6 inches that your potato plant grows. Add a little bit more soil on top, and until you reach the brim of your container.
Mm-hmm. I cut a new bed in the backyard, and my potatoes just started sprouting. I'm so excited.
Nice.
Okay, let's keep going here. Questions rolling in. So if you're just joining us, feel free to throw questions in the chat box. If you're calling in, go ahead and raise your hand and I will see your hand and I can allow you to talk to our panelists here. We have this a large chunk of farmers from Keep Growing Detroit. What'd you say, Kello?
I want to add that if she is doing her potatoes in a container, if it does get cold and her potatoes aren't ready yet, she can just put them inside in a warm area. And if she has grow lights or a nice sunny space, she can extend her growing season by just having them inside her home.
Okay, so like in the fall, she could bring them in since they're in container. Oh, that's a good idea. Okay, I think this is Shaha. She says, can decorative garden ornaments can lead to other this can lead to other toxins in the garden? So I think Shaha, if you can clarify what ornaments you're talking about. I always say, so one thing for me is I always say, a lot of people try to grow in those tires. I'm kind of against it personally. I think they can leach into your garden. Painting the outside of a raised bed, I think that's fine. I wouldn't paint the inside. Anybody have thoughts on garden ornaments? I'm not necessarily sure which ornament. If you have something in particular.
Anything that's painted.
Oh, she says windmills, metal stakes. I think all of those are good. Anything painted might be troublesome. Yeah,
also,
and of course, go ahead, Molly.
I've seen a lot of those metallic like gazing ball type things. Those, unless they're like purely metal, tend to have the paint has metals in it. And sometimes if they're older and if they're in contact with the soil, that can chip and shed. And I feel like we talk about heavy metals in our soils often. It's just a word of caution about gazing balls specifically.
Nice. Okay, next question from Alberta. Sorry if I'm not saying your name right. I'm sorry, Alberta. I missed the instruction on what to do to make tomatoes larger. That was shared on the last Zoom meeting about 2 weeks ago. I think that was you, Molly, making tomatoes larger.
Can you screenshot or screen share me, T?
I think so. Now, the thing I'm scared about is that I think when I shared it, we might have got kicked out of Facebook, but let's try it and see.
Okay.
And if we get kicked off, I'll jump back on because we're new to this.
Ready,
and
Lola.
Guess what? We're people and we're learning.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna share that with you now. Nice. And boom.
Okay.
Lola, did that oh, do you got it?
Oh, you got it.
Boom.
Can you see tomato?
I see it.
That's working? Okay, cool. So I had a live tomato transplant last time. So this is like a online version. So this is the different parts of your tomato transplant, right? So can you guys see my like pointer?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. So so if this is your tomato transplant, these are the parts. And you can see this box right here, the suckers. In between, usually these are compound leaves, and in between them and kind of where this meets the central tomato vine, you're going to see these suckers. That's, a growth point for the plant. And the more you allow the suckers to come out and create their own vines kind of laterally off of the plant, the bushier the plant gets, and it gets a little harder to manage. And oftentimes you end up with lots of smaller fruit instead of bigger fruit that kind of happens at regular intervals up and down the tomato vine. So when the plant is young, you want to kind of keep it focused on growth and production in either one or two central vines by going through with a clean pair of scissors or a clean knife and cutting off or removing these suckers. which will help you kind of like simplify the plant, help you trellis it more effectively, and should result in slightly bigger fruit that's easier to manage. The other trick we talked about was planting them deeper. So this right here is what they looked like when you got them from us. So many leaves down here. You can start to see maybe this was a sucker down here. And when you get them, you can plant about half of that plant, half the vine under the soil. Tomatoes are really good at sending out adventitious roots off of the main vine. So the more you plant under the soil, the more roots you're going to get off of the bottom of that plant, which will give it a nice, firm, and stable base for supporting the rest of the plant in the season. So this looks like, and I agree with it, about half of the plant, you take off the leaves and you plant half of it under the soil from the get-go. And you can also, this is a very tiny picture, but if you don't have deep, like for example, you're planting in raised beds, so you've got kind of like a limited amount of soil to work with, instead of planting it deeper straight down, you can actually lean. So choice B is for folks with only like 8 to 10 inches of soil to work with. You can lean it under the soil and it'll still grow roots off of that and give it a nice start in life.
Mind blown. I didn't know that. Thank you. That's
problem.
I needed to see that myself. Great. If you have any other questions about tomatoes, stick them in the chat, Alberta. But thanks so much, Molly. That was great.
No problem.
Lola, you say you had a question on Facebook?
Yeah, so Kenyatta is wondering, how do you pick kale and lettuce properly? And once you harvest them, will it grow again?
Yeah, let's get that to Akello.
Yeah. So with your kale plant and or many of those main brassicas, like your kale collards, dino kale, curly kale. So the plant on top, you're gonna have like your new growth happening here. Then as you move down the stems, you got your older growth. So typically you want to start your harvest at the bottom of the plant. And if you do have the tools like using a harvest knife or just a knife just to slice it off, but you don't necessarily need that. You can just use your hands and just make sure you have like a clean snap of the root. So like want to have your hand like right up against the stem and then you just want to snap it off. And that's pretty much proper kale harvesting.
Okay. Do you think that answered
Don't
that,
take from
Lola?
the top, take from the bottom. And if you do, I want to add, if you do have like older roots that are starting to like wilt off of the plant, just go ahead and just take those off. It's kind of like a harvest cleaning, if you will. That's going to help the plant focus its growth on those newer leaves.
To clarify,
About-
you mean leaves, not roots, right, Akela?
Oh, did I say
You're saying-
roots? My bad. So, don't remember where I said leaves, so yeah. Don't remember where I said roots, but I'll just repeat. The kale plant, your new growth is going to be at the top, and then as you move down the plant, it's going to be older leaves. So new leaves, older leaves at the bottom. You're going to want to harvest your older leaves. Make your hand is right up against the stem of the plant and then snapping it off or cutting it off. And if you have older roots, older leaves on your plants, you want to just clean those off so that the plant can focus on new growth.
And then
Nice.
how about lettuce?
Lettuce, what type? So is she trying to get a second harvest off that lettuce or just a one-time harvest?
Yeah, well, I think
Well, I'll
I think
explain
he's
both.
wondering- yeah, I think he's wondering how to harvest lettuce and also if you can get a second harvest on lettuce and kale.
So for lettuce, so you know how kale has its new growth happening on top? The new growth of lettuce is going to be at that bottom of the plant. And it's going to be at a certain point. So you might say some roots are happening at the bottom and then you got some new growth happening up here and this is the soil layer. So like a couple of inches above, this is where the new growth is happening. If you cut anywhere where that new growth is, it's going to be harder for that plant to grow back. So I was going to cut just a little bit above where that new growth is happening, and that's going to be easier for the plant to start regrowing. If you're not bothered about or trying to get a second harvest of your plant, I recommend that you just take the entire root, take the entire plant plus the root out of the soil, and then twist off or cut off the root and clean it off there, and use your whole lettuce head. Yeah.
Nice. Did that get it, Lola?
Think so.
All right. Actually, the next one is about potting soil from Catherine. And I think I'm going to give that one to you too, Akello. Would you leave your used potting soil outside over the winter, well moistened, to get a hard freeze, be an effective method to killing some of the pests between growing seasons? Oh, this may be Molly or Akello, but what are your thoughts on that? Freezing the potting soil or any soil to kill off pests in between their growing season?
Frankly, I mean, sometimes soil bags get left out, but we're not usually worried. Like, unless the worst that we see is some moss that starts to grow on the inside of the bag, but we aren't really seeing any pest inside of there. They have better habitats than a soil bag. Like, the actual soil is a better habitat for them than being inside of a soil bag, really. It's rare that I find pests inside of soil bags left over from the season, and we have a lot left over.
How about like in your containers? Like you've used it.
Gardens?
Yeah, you've used the container garden, and then you harvested your plant, and then what do you do?
It's the new season.
Yeah.
So with that, I would recommend that like if there is like pests exist, like it really depends on how many pests are in there. But I would add like some new soil to that mix if you have it. If you are just trying to like just keep on with the same mix and doing that, you are going to see like nutrient deficiencies in that soil, especially if it's just like a small container. Yeah, I don't think that's typically like a huge thing to worry about. Just make sure that you just add some new soil to your media mix or to your container instead of just straight using it. It's been fresh out the season. You don't want to use the same thing over and over and over. Just add a little bit to it. And if you are worried about it, I'd say try to dry it out. Like typically freezing, like unless you know that you're getting like a really hard freeze, like some things are going to be alive in there. So it's like those extremes, like freezing or really, really hot soil. That's when you know you're going to kill something or something's going to not be there anymore. And like that's not really going to happen over our winter, especially not like that. So I'd say don't worry about it. It's not going to be a huge issue. If there are pests there, they probably have better places to be. But I do recommend that if you try to use like the same root or the same container and same soil, that you clear out the roots that were in there, because that's where they're living. They're living in the old roots of the plants that were there previously. So clear out the roots and then add your new soil and you should be fine.
All right, I get that. I have a sidebar question. Molly, we were out in the field and the bok choy was crazy flea bitten and everything. Is that because the pests are in the soil, or like what's going on there? Maybe you can just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure a lot of people are having. I asked that because I've gotten a lot of sidebar questions about flea beetles, damage, and things like that right about now.
Yeah, those are flea beetles, and they do come up out of the soil. Yep. So they were already there. The best thing we've tried to do is to move their favorite plants to a different location on the farm so that next season they don't come up in the same place with the food just sitting there waiting for them. And you can employ some methods to try and keep their numbers low or protect them. you can purchase insect netting and use light remay or floating row cover to try and protect the plants and give them a safe covering while they're small. And even like you can, the flea beetles they're jumping insects. So if you leave usually we tent with floating row cover over hoops, but you can actually leave it kind of loose, still touching the plants. And as the fabric kind of like moves and taps the leaves loosely, it'll keep the flea beetles jumping off of and interrupt their eating habits. Keto, do you want to talk about diatomaceous earth applications?
Sure. Diatomaceous earth is basically looks like powder, and it's very, very tiny. It's the skeletons of very tiny insects or tiny creatures, and how in application it's very sharp for small bodies to walk over. So it works a lot better for soft-bodied insects. It's got some use for flea beetles, but it's not a perfect match in terms of dealing with flea beetles. But in application, you're basically doing a dusting on your plants. And as they, it creates an unfavorable or unfun or uncomfortable environment for them to be walking over the plants to do what they want to do and eat holes. So I think there's mixed reviews on how well it works for flea beetles, but it is one strategy. There are very limited strategies with flea beetles, unfortunately, because they're hard-bodied insects.
Okay. Okay, so throw any questions about pests that you have in there. The next question is from Keem. And then also, just a quick note, if you're on Facebook Live and you have a question, feel free to jump in the chat there. We'll try to get to your question as well. The next question is from Keem. He says, is it too late to sow corn directly? And what's the best method for amending my clay soil to prepare it? Molly, can you answer the question about corn? And if you want to jump on the clay soil as well, maybe.
Corn or sunflowers?
He did both.
Oh, got it. Corn, I believe so. Too late, for sure. That's got a pretty strict schedule. Sunflowers, no. You can absolutely sow those directly. Those are, depending on what kind you're growing them for. If they're a cut flower, they're anywhere between 60 and 85 days. So you'll have beautiful ones for Harvest Fest. And in terms of cut flower production, yeah, it's a good idea to have multiple rounds of sunflowers since they're a one-off crop. And you're still in the window if you use them for eating or seed saving. So go for it with the sunflowers, but in terms of corn, I'm pretty sure you've missed your window for good ear production.
Can you talk about just real quickly, how your thought process on that? So how you came to that answer, why is it too late to plant corn right now? Just kind of giving people that understanding, of how you got to that.
Got it. So a lot of it has to do with days to maturity and the season, right? So we're always thinking about what variety we want to grow, specifically corn. Corn is kind of tricky in terms of pollination. It really needs to be pollinated by corn of the same variety. Otherwise, if it crosses out, you end up with corn that doesn't have the same awesome either flavor, sugar content or eating quality. So you have to be really specific about timing and having the right amount of it. And also they're usually around 90 days from germinating to you actually getting a finished ear of corn. So 3 months, we're late. Um, what else is going on in my mind? Yeah, I think the old adage is knee high by the 4th of July, like these old sayings that we have. So they're real.
Okay.
They have to do with, yeah, daylight, the amount of sun, heat. You usually want to plant corn, either start it slightly before the last frost date inside as transplants, or plant it right on that date, our last frost date, first or second week in May.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then Keem is also asking on that same question about the best method for amending clay soil to prepare it. Keto or Akello, you guys want to talk about amending clay soil? What would you do? Thoughts on that?
You want to go?
Yeah, so ideally what you're going to try and get to, or your soil to look like and want it to feel like, you want to have soil where you can reach your hands in there like no problem or with not too much force. And probably what you're experiencing right now, you can't quite do that. And we do that because the plants that we grow, they enjoy that nice tilt, the really soft soil, so that their roots can penetrate. And many of the plants that we're planting right now have fibrous roots, and they really like to do that. Some have tap roots. And so ways that I would go about that method, if this is new land that you're just starting with, something that you're not like getting ready for like this next season, it was just in production, it was just chilling for a little bit, it's going to be a bit more in depth. Probably the quickest way and least labor intensive way, I think, method will be to and I'll give you 2 examples. To If you have access to a tiller, go through and till your land. And when you do this, just make sure that this is like, at least you want to only like till maybe once or twice throughout a year, and try to keep it to that. You don't want to over till your land. So getting it started, go through till, try to get like at least 6 inches of soil kind of rolled up if you can. And then I recommend that you put compost on top and then try to mix that through and make your beds while you're doing that. And to help you lock in that nutrients and that mix, well, I guess first and foremost, get a soil test done on the soil. So kind of backtracking a little bit. But once you have your soil tilled, compost laid down, get your plants in there, make your beds. And I highly recommend that you cover your soil with some type of mulch. Nature doesn't like to be uncovered, so weeds are going to naturally grow to help protect it from erosion of all types. And so make sure that you get your plants in there, get them covered, and to preserve it so you don't have to like go back every year and till. Try to protect it during the winter by adding more layers of mulch, covering it with tarp. And I guess this is kind of the extension of what you just did or what I just explained. But like next year, you'll find, and when you manage your land, try not to step on it too much. So compaction is what's gonna make you have to go back and till up the land. So try to make sure that you're only stepping on paths that are designated, and keeping to that rule, and making sure that people working in your garden keeps to that rule too. So once winter hits, adding more compost, adding more wood chips, and then if you do have it, kind of covering your land to protect it from snow load, which can compact soil too. And then when you bring it up next year, instead of using a tiller this time, just use a broad fork or some type of fork to just loosen the soil, not to till it, to help let air get in. And you should find that it's easier to reach down and plant your plants without having to disturb the soil too much.
Mm-hmm.
But That's probably the most fast track way to get your soil done, to get your land prepared. It's really tough to, like I originally, because I've had um, this same type of problem too, like getting my personal land started. So like the land that I'm planning to build on, a house was just built there, and I'm thinking I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna dig it by hand, try to go down like at least a layer down and like clear up as much as I can because there's still a bunch of stuff in that land just left from construction and whatnot, and you don't want to plant in that. So, but I learned that, oh man, this is like a patty pan right on top. Like there's really no topsoil there to really work with starting off. So that means that you got to bring that in. But if you want to spend that time, or if you do have that time, you can take your time by slowly bringing the land back into production by doing processes that will definitely pay off in the long term, but will just take a lot of your time, your immediate time. So if you do want to kind of fast track that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through with the tiller, pick out those things that I find undesirable within the soil and do as much as that. Then I'm going to bring in some compost, and then I'm going to lay some wood chips on top, and then I'm going to tell everybody not to step on it, to keep clear. And one thing that I might also do is go through and add my amendments. So if you figure out what amendments you need from your soil test, add that after, or say add that before you till, and then just till the amendments in, then put your compost down, then put your wood chips on, and then really take that time to plan out what you're going to plant in that new area, because you've technically kind of reset it. So you reset it to an area where you can, where it's easier for you to work with. So if you're trying to instantly plant in your soil, which is already really hard clay, it's not really reset. It's kind of set in its ways a little bit, and it's going to take you to forcibly change that soil so that it can go into the direction that you want it to go to with your farming or what you want to do.
Thank you, Kelly. You took us all the way through from start to beginning there. I appreciate that.
You got to think about all of that.
Yeah, and restoring the land, that's really important for a lot of people with vacant spaces. Is like some people luck up and get really good areas, and some people don't. And the next question here was from Jocelyn, who says she wants to start a garden. I just cleaned up my backyard, and I'm looking to find someone to help me build vegetable beds. So does anyone know anyone who I could pay to do this? So I'm wondering, are you wanting raised beds, or are you wanting to form vegetable beds in ground? I do know a couple people who are selling the raised beds. We also have a guide on our website, which I can link in here, or maybe somebody can throw the link in there, that shows you how to build them yourselves. It tells you all the lumber that you need, all the hardware you need. So if you're talking about raised beds, you could possibly do it yourself. I do have a couple of resources of folks who are building them if you want. I can share those with you, Jocelyn. And then Akello pretty much walked you through how you would prep your land to get growing. So if you have any more questions about that, maybe you can email us. I'll keep scrolling down. Couple more questions here. All right. Molly, did you see that question about strawberries in there? I planted strawberries last year from seed in the ground and in planters on my porch right next to the ones in the ground. They both took off this year, and the ones in the ground have spread and flowered and now have berries. The ones in the planters have grown like crazy and are sending out runners, but no flowers or fruit. Are the ones in the planters ever going to fruit, or should I move them to the ground?
Gotcha. Actually, Keto, do you want to talk strawberry reproduction? I feel like that's your wheelhouse, but yeah, I've had mine skip a year too. Kind of depends on what kind of strawberry, right, Keto?
Right. And the other thought I had about that one was, if the ones in the containers are not getting as much light, then that could be a factor.
Yeah.
One thing I've seen is potentially too much nitrogen. So if it's a container mix that has something like a fertilizer, or you added a lot of compost, sometimes having too much nitrogen can delay or prevent flowering. So that might be a consideration.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. So a couple things to think about there. For the strawberry question. Keem said, how much compost are you mixing for that clayey soil? And I'm gonna say as much as you can. I don't know the size that you're working with. If you have really clay soil, yeah, go ahead, Keto. You had a thought on that one?
Yeah, well, if you're planning for a large area, just a thought that there's maybe I'll link one in a second here, but there's a compost calculator online that you can get pretty easily, and you can kind of, if you measure the area that you want to put compost down, the square footage of the area, and the depth, it could tell you how much compost you would need to get to cover that area. So I'll put a link up. But
Okay.
generally speaking, at least 2 or 3 inches is what I would recommend for a heavy clay soil.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Okay, and then Jocelyn was wondering about soil testing from Keep Growing Detroit. Jocelyn, yeah, we traditionally do soil testing. The last 2 months, the soil testing lab that we send our soil tests was closed. Now that things are starting to open up, we're going to check in. That's the University of Massachusetts where we send. They test for lead and pH and percent organic matter in your soil. I'll follow up with you guys on when that opens. The process is to just request a soil test, and either our staff can come out and do that, or you can bring a soil test to us. So stay tuned. Last we checked, they're still closed, but that may change any minute. There's another question about the use of white vinegar and baking soda to test the soil. I have not heard of that. Molly, you laughed. Have you heard of that one?
I have heard of that one.
What's that about?
Yeah, so it's the do-it-yourselfer's pH test. What was the question specifically? I'm sorry.
Ever use what? Yeah.
Got it. Okay, now I see it. Sorry, I'm scrolling. Yeah, so this is a way to test your soil pH. So whether it's acidic or alkaline. So what you do is you combine your soil, like a mix of soils from your garden space, into either vinegar or a baking soda solution. And if it reacts with one or the other, you're able to, again, like estimate, get a rough idea of whether or not your soil is so 7 is a neutral pH, and anything above it is alkaline, and anything below it is acidic, right? Vinegar is an acid. If you drop soil into an acid and it fizzes and hisses, and you get some sort of reaction out of it, chances are that it's coming into contact with something that's alkaline, has a high pH. That would indicate your soil is alkaline. And if you take the same soil, don't use it on the same tested soil, second test, right? And if you drop the same soil into a baking soda solution and it fizzes and you get a reaction, then chances are you have an acidic, a low pH to your soil. So it's kind of like the quick and dirty test. It works within reason, but you're not going to get the kind of accurate measure that you would get if you sent your soil to a lab for specific testing. This isn't going to help you solve fertility issues or solve mineralization issues because you're not getting specific information. So if you're using a test like this to dictate how you amend your soils, chances are you could be adding too much or too little because you don't have all the information you need to make good soil building decisions. But it is the quick and dirty, yes.
Yep. So So I just threw in the resource request form for Keep Growing Detroit that if you want to do a site visit and get a soil test from us, you would just throw your information on that. It's a good way to communicate with us, or just email us and we can filter your request. So that's that. And as soon as that lab opens up, we can make an appointment with you. Keem said, I'm assuming that there's lead in my soil, and I don't know if that's quite a fair assumption. You should definitely get a lead test from a university. I mean, we've done, and I don't have the exact figure at the top of my head. I was just on our website looking for it. Keto, I don't know if you have that figure, but I feel like the of all the tests we've conducted, I want to say somewhere, don't quote me on this, but I want to say somewhere less than 30% have lead in the soil from Detroit,
Something
somewhere
like
in
that.
that ballpark, huh?
I said something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's somewhere in that ballpark. So your lead levels may be good. So let's get a test for you, Keem, and just verify that. But if your lead levels are high, what do you do? Is the question. If your lead levels are high, at a certain point, we recommend not growing there, and that's just based off of federal recommendations on high soil lead levels. We wouldn't want anybody to consume any of that lead and get it into your bodies, ingest it. If your lead levels are moderate, there are some things that you can do to either raise up your soil using raised beds, or maybe lasagna beds or something like that. And so hopefully that answers your question there. Keeping going through here. Is it too late to sow cucumber seeds? And do cucumbers need to be trellised? Molly, we were just talking about that in our hot crop class. You want to take that one?
Sure. You don't have to trellis cucumbers, but they benefit from it and help you manage either, vertically on a string like we do at the KGD farm, or if you create some sort of like arc or table with deer fencing or something like that, helps keep them off the ground, helps you manage them, and also reserve some space for other things if they're going up, because cucumbers will quickly take over and scurry all over the garden. So they don't require trellising, but it's a good idea if you have a small amount of space. And we will be planting a second round of cucumbers in our high tunnel. I think it's usually 60 to 75 days, so 2.5 months. I don't think it's too late to do cucumbers or a late round of cucumbers at this point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Lola, I think you say you had a couple questions on Facebook. You want to jump in?
Yeah, so we got someone wondering if you can add fish bones to aid the soil.
Kello,
I'll take
you
that.
No.
Okay, Keto, go
Answer
ahead.
is yes. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's one that people talk about, and I've heard a lot of good reports of using. I think bones, maybe it's more like fish guts is what you're going after. I think that's I'm not sure how much bones are gonna help as much as like the decomposing fish guts are what people talk about are a good fertilizer. But in any case, I think it could be a great additive, and I've heard people talk about that. The only concern is to give it enough time to decompose before you plant. And,
Otherwise, you'll have all the cats.
right.
So you just bury that
Which could help with the rats.
in your beds?
There
You're
you go.
burying that right in your beds? Or in your
Yeah, I
compost?
think that would be like a end of the season thing, maybe.
Okay.
Like getting ready for next year.
Lola, did you have other questions on Facebook?
Yeah, the other question is about can you grow watermelon in a container?
Keto, we did that container class. You want to take that?
Sure. Yes, you can. Just the caveat, I think just the warning overall with container is try not to cram too much into a container. So I would suggest you check out the slides we had from that class. We have a list with some general recommendations of how many plants to fit into what size pots. And that's all up on YouTube, on our classes that are on YouTube. But in short, like it would be like for 10, 6 to 10 gallon pot, 1 watermelon plant.
Okay. More questions from you, Lola, or should we keep going? We got 1 or 2 more on Zoom, and then we'll be probably closing out soon.
Yeah, let's keep going on Zoom.
Okay. Catherine was wondering, what garden books do you guys refer to most often during the growing season? So I guess each of you can chime in with your favorite garden book or your reference. What are you using, Akello?
Get the exact name without having to go to my bookshelf, but
Molly's finding her book.
Right.
It's right on her nightstand.
Yeah, you guys are seeing my, this is my bedroom, and this
Hi,
is
bedroom.
my nightly reading.
What do you, Kello's looking up his book. What do you got, Molly?
Grab my book. I'll be right back.
Cool.
Okay.
Number 1, Johnny's Selected Seed.
I knew one of you farmers were gonna pull that up.
This is always here. I think this is even this year's, but I have 10 years of those. I don't live in New England anymore, but this is super relevant. Is it backwards? Are you seeing this backwards?
I'm not. It's good.
That's weird. Weeds of the Northeast. It's always a good idea to be able to do really good weed ID, and a lot of the ones in New England are also in the Midwest, but not all of them. So that's great. I brought that with me when I moved. Crop planning for organic vegetable growers, for sure. The Organic Farmers Business Handbook. This is making sound business decisions for your farm. And this one I've read a couple times, but City Bountiful. This is more about the history and cultural significance and the deep roots of the urban agriculture movement. So this kind of frames my work. So we've got the nuts and bolts of agriculture, business planning, crop planning, and context, all in one.
I feel like I just took a journey through Molly's brain, and I saw all of those parts. Akela, what book did you go get?
So these 2 books are free if you go to Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, SHARE, S-A-R-E. They should be on their website, but ones that I'm referring to a lot, Managing Cover Crops, Cover Crop Profitability, usually flipping through this to decide what would be the best cover crop, and it's pretty awesome, and it has, where is this page? So like this section of the book pretty much just summarized the entirety of the book. And it has all the cover crops that are commonly used broken down into like performance and rows, cultural traits, et cetera, top performing cover crops for each region. That was always helpful. And then this right here, this book, Research Guide for Organic and Insect and Disease Management. So let's say you got aphids as an issue, you just go to the page where aphids are, and then it lists just the cultural practices that you can do, and then the, what is the word, reactive practices that you can do to manage that pest. So like, say somebody had issues with flea beetles, they would find the flea beetles, and it comes with really nice pictures of each pest. Let's see if I can do that. So it has pictures of like diseases and all the pests. So it's kind of hard. It's like, oh, what does this disease look like? Or what does this pest look like? it will likely have that common pest, which is most likely common inside of this book here. And it's really a nice go-to source for things that you're trying to make a decision on, especially when it comes to diseases and pests. Yeah. Those are my two go-to books.
Nice. I took a picture while you were opening your books.
Yeah,
Keto, did you have one or two books that you referred to? We have about 8 more questions, and then we'll probably be wrapping up here. I'll try to get through them.
I put some of them in the notes. I'm going to be quite honest. I don't look at books that much.
Wow.
Not that I shouldn't. I oftentimes when I'm needing this kind of information, I'm in the field. So usually it's the internet I'll go to first. I mean, I listed some books that I think are really great resources that I've used in years past. So The Garden Primer is a good overall gardening book, both for vegetable growing and for perennials and other things. And then Elliot Coleman has a series of really great books. The Vegetable Grower's Handbook, I think his name's Frank Tozer. But I just want to talk about strategy when you're looking on the internet, because like there's lots of rabbit holes you can end up going down when you're looking for good information for referencing from the internet. So if I'm looking something up, usually I'll lean towards looking at what university have from extension, like what do they have. So growing sweet potatoes, and I'll go and sometimes I'll do growing sweet potatoes PDF, and that'll usually lead me towards resources that a university might have. So I'll tend to I'll tend to look at different look through the different resources. Then I'll click on a handful of them and read through them and look for similarities in the responses to know that, okay, that's probably a good lead to go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Age of technology, you can get a million different answers online, but yeah. There are a few more questions, and just we'll try to get through these last ones pretty quickly, and then go ahead and end for the day. Keem was asking about phytoremediation for the soil for lead contamination. I know a little bit about it. I know that it takes a lot more work than we may be ready for. I know that you have to plant the if you have really heavily contaminated soil, you need to think through like where are you going to take the plants that you use to remediate the soil. So that's a really a tough one. I'm going to go to the second one here. English cherry tree. It has a yellow leaf disease. Keto, do you know about that one? Your background in landscaping. Yellow leaf disease on a cherry tree.
You know what, IDing that kind of stuff is a lot easier when you have images.
Okay.
So feel free to email me. Maybe we'll make sure and put emails in the notes at the end.
Okay.
And if you want to send just email me a picture and we can try and figure it out from there. So I want to say that I've been trying to post a bunch of things in the chat, but I'm realizing that, as Lola brought to my attention, that I was just sending it to the panelists. So I'm going to try and go back through. I put a bunch of links up as we were talking, and I didn't realize I wasn't sending it to the whole chat. So I'm going to try and send that stuff now, including the compost calculator for Keen.
Thank you. Okay, so look for those links in the chat. I'll get through. Sorry, he was sending it to the wrong group of people. Okay, I think maybe the last question is coming from Jamila. What are your thoughts on using hydrogen peroxide? Is that for Anybody familiar with using hydrogen peroxide? Is that for, well, let me not assume. I think there's a couple different ways you can use it. Anyone have used hydrogen peroxide in their growing techniques at all?
I've I think maybe we're talking about actually putting it in the garden to mitigate, bacteria or diseases, but I don't have any experience with it.
Yeah, she said, yeah, for diseased plants. Kelly, you started to say something. Have you
I
used
was
it?
saying, I was saying I do not have any experience with hydrogen.
Okay. At least there was a couple different uses because I've used peroxide to like clean things, like, but like fish and things like that. But that's kind of a sidebar. Keto, have you used hydrogen peroxide for disease? Okay.
No, no, I haven't. I would be
Okay.
cautious to do that.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. We don't have experience with that one. And I think that is our last question. If there's any final questions, we did an hour and a half of Q&A. Woo woo. Thanks for joining us. Wait, before we go, there's somebody who's raising their hand. They may be a call in, so I'm going to just allow them to talk right quick. That's Jasmine. Jasmine, I'm going to let you talk for a second. You want to ask your question? Are you there, Jasmine?
Looks like they might be muted.
Jasmine, can you hear me? Yep. Maybe it was a mistake. Did you raise your hand? Did you have a question, Jasmine? Okay. Okay, well, if you did, feel free to raise it. I'll give people a couple more minutes if you had any final questions, but Keto did pop in a lot of, thanks Zora, she said good information, a lot of links there. Check out the chat box. There's a lot of links for some of the things that we've been talking about added there. Also, earlier in the chat box, I had added the resource form for Keep Growing Detroit, which can also be found on our website. Lola, any final questions from Facebook, or are we good?
We're good.
All right. Oh, no problem, Jasmine. Okay, well, thanks for joining us today. This was kind of a wildly experiment, and we just wanted to make sure that you had access to us and for any questions that you're having along your gardening journey. We'll possibly be trying to do this again just to check in with you guys. And of course, you can always reach out to myself or one of our staff members. Most of our emails, mine is TEE@Keep Growing Detroit, and most of it is just our names at keepgrowingdetroit.org. For specific questions that you may have, you can even send pictures. We're always happy to help in that way. You may want to give us a couple day turnaround on that. A lot of us are in and out of the field, and but feel free to send specific questions to our emails. And with that, I'll go ahead and close us. Thanks for joining us. Any final thoughts from panelists?
No, keep the questions coming. Yeah.
Yeah, good
Keep
talking
questioning. What's that
Stay
Molly
on top of those
say?
weeds.
It was good talking with everybody. Yeah, get on top of the weeds.
Get on top of the waves, yeah. Thanks, guys. See you later. Thanks so much for joining us this Saturday. Guys, take care.
Pizza.